Hello everyone, and welcome to War in Middle-earth, The War of the Ring, a multi-part series on the final and most important conflict of the Third Age, where new heroes would rise and old villains would fall. In this episode, we look at the prelude to the War of the Ring, and how the northwest of Middle-earth looked upon the eve of Sauron's final war. The year is 2942. After almost 3,000 years, Sauron has finally returned to Mordor. He suffered setbacks. The fortress of Dol Guldur has been lost to him for a second time. His potential ally in Smaug has been killed. The orcs of the Misty Mountains have been almost completely annihilated, and the Dwarven kingdom of Erebor and the Northman kingdom of Dale have been refounded. But you see, these setbacks aren't game changers, because Sauron has been very busy the last 2,000 years, amassing power in the east and south. He's been very cautious, making sure not to reveal himself and his newfound power too soon, so that when he does reveal himself, he'll already be too powerful to stop. For Sauron, Mordor is the final stop, and from there he'll not make one step back. He gets to work right away. In 2951, he begins the reconstruction of Barad-dûr, whose foundations were never truly destroyed. In the same year, he sends 3 of the Nazgûl, led by Khamûl the Easterling, to reoccupy Dol Guldur as a northern base of operations. By 2953, the Dark Tower has been rebuilt, and Sauron takes up residence. The following year, finally feeling secure enough in his power, and believing himself now to be unassailable, Sauron announces his return to the world. Mount Doom erupts, causing the last inhabitants of Ithilien to flee across to Anduin. All across Middle-earth, the Free Peoples can only sit and wait as Sauron makes his plans for his final war. In this video, I want to talk about the participants in the approaching War of the Ring, who leads them, their strengths, their weaknesses, and their plans. The point of this video is to give everything context so that future videos will make more sense for the viewers. The War of the Ring will be divided into 2 theatres of war, the Northern Theatre and the Southern Theatre. The Southern Theatre is the primary theatre that is given the most attention, although the Northern Theatre is extremely important as well. There is limited physical interaction between both theatres, but events that occur in the Southern Theatre do have major effects on the Northern Theatre. There is also something I'd prefer to call a Western Theatre as well, but that won't become relevant until much later in the series. The primary aggressor in both theatres is Sauron, although I first focused on his strength in the Southern Theatre. Sauron's power is located in Mordor, with his 2 primary fortresses being Barad-dûr, ruled by himself, and the fallen city of Minas Morgul, ruled by the Witch King of Angmar. Sauron's plans are quite simple: the subjugation of Middle-earth and the destruction of those who stand in his way. Sauron has spent the last 2,000 years amassing his strength, and by the War of the Ring, he believes he has reached the point where his power is unassailable. Even if he does not overwhelm his enemies in one strike, Sauron believes that he will eventually win a war of attrition. To stop his enemies from uniting against him like they did during the War of the Last Alliance, Sauron has changed his strategy to divide and conquer, preferring to launch many attacks against multiple enemies instead of concentrating all of his power on the one enemy. At his command, Sauron has orcs in Mordor and Minas Morgul, likely numbering in the low hundreds of thousands. Outside of Mordor, he has numerous allies that are under his command too. The most dangerous of these are the Corsairs of Umbar, who have the ability to land or ferry troops onto Gondor's long southern coastline. Other allies include the fearsome Haradrim and their Mumakil warbeasts, as well as people such as the mysterious Variags of Khand and the black-skinned, red-tongued Trollmen of Far Harad. Joining Mordor from the northeast are the various Easterling tribes that inhabit the vast plains of Rhûn, and although many of them will fight in the Northern Theatre, some of them do join the invasion of Gondor. The Haradrim, Corsairs, and Easterlings each contribute tens of thousands of soldiers to Sauron's armies. All in all, Sauron's strength is absolute, and in a conventional war there is almost no way he can lose. Even if his armies are repeatedly defeated in battle, his foes cannot assail Mordor, meaning that soon enough, he will be able to send forth new armies to assault increasingly weakening foes. The only real avenue to Sauron's defeat lies in the use or destruction of the One Ring, which is now property of a certain hobbit named Frodo Baggins. Of course, this does not mean that Sauron's path to victory will be easy. The chief of Sauron's foes in the south is Gondor. The kingdom is a shadow of its former glory, but is still powerful enough to hold the Anduin against Sauron's forces. The stewards have not sat idly by as Sauron returned to power. Steward Ecthelion II refortifies Caer Andros and builds the Ramessor Core, a massive ring fort around the Pelennor Fields. During his reign, a mysterious man named Vorongil leads a surprise assault on Umbar, burning much of the Corsair fleet at anchor and slaying the captain of the Havens. Under his son, Denethor II, the refortification of Gondor continues, and through the use of the Anor Stone, one of the Palantiri, Denethor becomes wise to the ways of the world. Unfortunately, Denethor eventually comes into contact with Sauron, who is using the captured Ithil Stone, and although Denethor holds his own in a contest of wills, the encounters leave him weakened and prone to despair and paranoia. Despite these shortcomings, Denethor is a strong and capable leader, although proud and little loved by his people. His sons, Boromir and Faramir, are able commanders, valiant and well loved, and from their garrison at Osgiliath they defend Gondor's eastern frontier. From Minas Tirith, Denethor has ultimate command of Gondor's army, which numbers upwards of 25,000 men, from the elite guardsmen of Minas Tirith to levied fishermen from the far-off fief of Anfalas. Although Gondor's armies are well armed and well trained, the threat of the Corsairs of Umbar and Haradrim from the south will force them to defend a frontier from Caer Andros along the river Anduin to Belfalas far off to the west. Gondor's navy is little match for the Corsair fleet, and should Sauron launch an assault on all sides, Gondor's forces might be stretched too thin to hold all corridors. The problem for Gondor is a simple one. They simply do not have enough men. Fortunately for Gondor, they have an oathbound ally in the north, the Kingdom of Rohan. In its relatively short history, Rohan has made it through trials and tribulations, and by the War of the Ring, it is near to the most powerful it has ever been. In a perfect scenario, from his capital of Edoras, Theoden King could call upon at least 12,000 mounted spears to defend Rohan or her allies, but the scenario was far from perfect. War brews on both Rohan's eastern and western borders. Orcs from Mordor raid across the Anduin and the Emyn Muil, and in the west march has once again been abandoned to the Dunlendings. These problems could be dealt with, if not for the illness of King Theoden, which has paralysed his kingdom. Although in his mid-60s at the time, this illness is not from nature alone, and has instead been administered by Theoden's once loyal advisor, Grima Wormtongue. Grima is not doing this on his own, though, and is actually in service to Saruman the White. Speaking of Saruman, he is our third player in this southern theatre. Once the leader of the White Council, Saruman has barricaded himself in Isengard, fortifying it with the help of his newfound Dunlending allies. From there, he causes trouble in southern Eriador and on Rohan's western frontier, much to the anger of the Rohirrim, who once saw him as a close ally. Unknown to many, Saruman's use of the Orthanc Stone has resulted in him being ensnared by Sauron, and now he secretly serves the Dark Lord. That's serves with quotation marks, by the way, because although Saruman has currently thrown his lot in with Sauron, he is still driven by his desire to possess the One Ring, and he will betray Sauron with little hesitation. Still, for all intents and purposes, he fights on the side of Sauron, and he plans on dealing with Rohan so that the Dark Lord can deal with Gondor alone. In the last few years of the Third Age, he has gathered and bred orcs, perfecting the fearsome Uruk-hai. With the power of subterfuge, an army of over 10,000 orcs and several thousand Dunlendings, Saruman may not be the most powerful of the participants in the War of the Ring, but he is certainly the most ambitious. This is the Southern Theatre, Gondor versus Mordor and their mannish allies in the south, and Rohan versus Isengard in the north. The winner of that northern battle will assist the southern, and although Sauron and Saruman have the numerical advantage, they must still be careful. Sauron must find a way to cross the Anduin and take the mighty fortress of Minas Tirith, which no enemy has ever besieged, and Saruman must find a way to defeat the Rohirrim without the army of the Horse Lords surrounding and crushing him in the open plains. In the northern theatre, Sauron has refortified his fortress of Dol Guldur, once the capital of the ancient woodland realm ruled by King Oropher. It was from there his corruption spread during the earlier years of the Third Age, and although he was forced to abandon the fortress twice, it was neither destroyed nor occupied by his enemies. Under the command of Camul the Easterling, orcs once again begin to gather and breed in Dol Guldur, and from there they will strike out at Sauron's numerous enemies in the north, specifically the elves of Lothlorien and those of the woodland realm. To the east, the vast lands of Rhûn stretch northwards, and from here, Sauron draws forth even more tribes of Easterlings to do his bidding, and should war come to pass, these Easterlings will have their sights set on the rich kingdom of Erebor and Dale. The strength of Sauron's forces in Dol Guldur are unknown, but they likely numbered in the high tens of thousands. As for the Easterlings, they too probably numbered in the tens of thousands. Despite the strength of these forces, the Northern Theatre is still secondary to Sauron, and even if his armies aren't successful in the north, they only need occupy his northern foes, so they cannot help their allies to the south. Of Sauron's enemies in the north, the most powerful are the recently retaken lands of Dale and Erebor. With the death of Smaug, those wandering and homeless dwarves belonging to Durin's folk have gathered at their ancient mountain home. Owing to the flowing wealth and the strong leadership of King Dain II Ironfoot, the dwarves of Durin's folk have quickly returned to power not seen since the days of Thror, King Under the Mountain. With Erebor and the Iron Hills firmly in their grasp, the dwarves present an impressive roadblock for Sauron if he wishes to invade the western lands beyond the Misty Mountains. The dwarven strength is unknown, but in my video on the dwarves I released last year, I estimated their strength to be between 5 to 10,000. And the dwarves do not fight alone. Beneath the mountain lies the rebuilt city of Dale, and further to the south, the rebuilt town of Esgaroth. Together, these two cities are the heartland of the new kingdom of Dale, founded by Bard, followed by Bane, and now ruled by Brand. By the time of the War of the Ring, Brand's kingdom extends to the River Carnant in the east and the River Kelduin in the south, and between those rivers the Northmen have united, creating a powerful nation not seen since the ancient days of the kingdom of Rhovanion. Although their strength is unknown, I would estimate that it would be in the high thousands, possibly nearing as many as 10,000. To the west lie the Elven realms east of the Misty Mountains, Lothlorien ruled by Lord Celeborn and Lady Galadriel, and the Woodland realm ruled by King Thranduil. Both of these peoples are no strangers to war, and their age-old leaders have fought Sauron before. King Thranduil's folk are the most numerous of the remaining elves in the west of Middle-earth, and although the Sylvan folk lack the craft nor skill in combat that their Noldoran and Sindarin cousins have, they are valorous, and most importantly, they are fighting in the woodland territory that is natural to them. Alongside Thranduil's elves are perhaps the hardiest men in Middle-earth, the Woodmen, who have managed an existence in the dark depths of central Mirkwood. Although they do not number many, and although they have no central leadership, they won't give an inch of ground in their fight for their forest. In my video on the Elven strength, I estimated that Thranduil's forces probably numbered around 7,000. Across the Anduin and to the south lies Lothlorien, a perpetual thorn in Sauron's side. Although the Galadrim do not number as many as the Sylvan Elves, they do have Noldor and Sindar amongst their number, and they are protected by the natural barrier of the Anduin, and furthermore, they have Lady Galadriel, who wields her Ring of Power, Nenya. Even if Lothlorien is not as strategically important as other locations, Sauron still very much wishes to deal death and destruction to Galadriel, his most hated of enemies, who played a major part in foiling his plans in the Second Age. In my video on Elven strength, I estimated Lothlorien's forces to be around 3 to 4,000, but one mustn't discount the power of Nenya when looking at that number. Lothlorien is not the only foe of Sauron's that dwells along the banks of the River Anduin. The Beornings and the Men of the Vales of Anduin have prospered since the defeat of the Mountain Orcs at the Battle of the Five Armies. Beorn has since died of old age, but his son Grimbeorn the Old now rules, and many Men of the Vales will rally under his leadership. Although the Men of the Vales and the Beornings cannot gather great armies, they hold the passes of the Misty Mountains, and their lands are hostile to the servants of Sauron, wherever they might go. But Sauron is not entirely defenseless either in that area. The Mountain Orcs, although greatly diminished, will not resist the Dark Lord's call to arms, and although they cannot rally together great armies like they used to, they will certainly pose a threat to many villages and homesteads that dot the Vales of Anduin. Thus in the north, we have Sauron's forces in Dol Guldur, along with his Easterling allies, arrayed against the forces of the dwarves of Erebor, the Men of Dale, the elves of Lothlorien, and the elves of Mirkwood. Although Sauron once again has the numerical advantage, all of his enemies are fighting in terrain that is favourable to them. His Easterlings must find a way to cross the Carnan and the Kelduin and breach the mountain city of Erebor, and his orcs must find a way to eradicate the elves in their woods, without becoming victims of the forest first. As for the lands beyond the Misty Mountains, Sauron pays them little attention as of yet. Rivendell, Lindon, the Shire, Bree, they're all far from his forts, and why wouldn't they be? If his enemies further to the east fall first, then what hope do those lands have? But notably, those lands aren't far from the forts of Saruman. As for the War of the Ring, that will begin when Sauron wishes it to begin, and Sauron has proven that he will wait a long time. But there is something that is putting his plans into overdrive: the capture of the creature known as Gollum in the year of 3017. From Gollum, Sauron manages to glean that the One Ring has in fact been found, and that it resides in the Shire in the hands of someone named Baggins. Fearing that his enemies may get to the One Ring first, in the year of 3017, Sauron makes his final preparations for war. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, or at least found it interesting. The next video will focus on the hunt for the ring and Sauron's first assaults on the west, so stay tuned for that. Thank you, farewell, and remember... Yeah, honestly, I don't have any useful advice for you this time, sorry.